Hello, today we're going to make a potato bacon cheddar tart. And while I go through these ingredients, just keep in mind that when you serve this, you're not getting a huge chunk, you're getting a slice of this because it starts off with 2 pounds of bacon. Make sure that is not thick cut. Make sure that it's a thin cut bacon. That's 2 full pounds. You're going to use every last bit of it. We're going to use some black pepper, about 2.5 teaspoons. It's really to taste. About 4 to 5 cloves of garlic. About a tablespoon of rosemary. You see, I'm reusing this bottle, but that actually is rosemary, and I've ground it up. We're going to also use about a tablespoon of thyme, 1.5 teaspoons of sage. You want to make sure that's rubbed sage so it's not the whole leaf. Sage is actually very potent, so you want to make sure you're using only the 1.5 teaspoons. Same thing with tarragon, 1.5 teaspoons of tarragon. And again, I've reused this bottle. I've taken my tarragon, I've run it through the food processor so it's nice and small pieces. And then we're going to take about a pound or about 4 cups of cheddar. Cheddar makes everything better. So make sure you have plenty of cheese on there. And then we're going to use about 2.5 pounds of potatoes. And we're going to slice these very thin because we're going to shingle them. I've left the skins on. I've cleaned these. I've left the skin on for nutritional value, but you're welcome to peel them. You want to make sure that you have enough products to do approximately 5 layers. It doesn't always work out that way. And you'll see as we go through the process, it's not a big deal if you have less layers. But you want to have at least 2.5 pounds of potatoes ready to go. As far as special equipment goes today, we are going to be using the hand mandolin. That's for us to go ahead and slice up the potatoes nice and thin. And we're also going to use a sheet pan underneath our cast iron pan. And this is where all of the magic is going to happen. And the reason we use the sheet pan underneath is because of the bacon. As we're cooking it, if any of the bacon grease happens to come out, it'll get caught on our sheet pan because we're going to bake this in the oven at 350 degrees. Hold on to your hat. For nearly 3 hours. We want to make sure everything is cooked through. But you can test it as you go after about an hour and a half to see that the potatoes have actually cooked through and the bacon has rendered all of its fat so that you get a nice crispy product on the outside and a super, super moist and delicious layering of those potatoes on the inside. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, first things first, we're going to put together what amounts to our seasoning. Now, you will recall I did have my peppermill out. We are going to use this, but not in this particular mixture. So first, we're going to get a tablespoon of rosemary. And you see those are not the whole, I've chopped those up, so it's not the entire leaf itself. So there's a tablespoon of rosemary. All right, we're going to do the same thing with our thyme. I'm happen to have ground thyme on hand, but as long as you cut up the leaves, you'll be good. And then we need 1.5 teaspoons, so we're going to use our teaspoon measure 3 times, of sage. 1, 2, 3. And then the same thing with our tarragon. So I got this tarragon from my garden. I dried it, and then I put it into this. I'm reusing a jar just so that it's easy for me. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then we're going to take our garlic. First, we're going to go ahead and just mix up our herbs. Okay, and now we're just going to go ahead and add in our garlic. You've seen me do this many, many times. So we're just going to press out some garlic. Put that over here. A couple more, and if you don't like garlic, you don't have to use it. But it will help season those potatoes. It'll be really good. You could also add onion to this if you want. If you want to add onion, just chop it up very fine and make sure that you have about, I'd say, half a cup tops of onion. I just don't like to have onion in this, but it would be a nice accompaniment if you'd like that flavor. All right, so we're just going to mix this up. Look at that, I got a nice long piece of tarragon there. Make sure everything is combined. And we're going to use this in between the layers to season. So I'm stirring it right now, but I will stir it again each time that I use it so that we get a nice even flavoring throughout. Okay, and there you have it. That's our seasoning. Let's move on to layering our bacon. Well, it's time to go ahead and put our bacon in. So I've opened up both packages because once you get started, your hands get all greasy. So you want to make sure that you're using thin cut bacon, as I mentioned before. And you want to have overlap here. So I tend to start with the first pieces on the outside. Make sure it goes in and hits the center. And we're just going to repeat this until all of the bacon is gone. And at some point you might think, oh, I have too much bacon. Well, first of all, there's no such thing. But second of all, because you are overlapping, you're going to find that you have plenty of bacon and you might not have room for it all. So this is a slower process because you want to separate the bacon. And you have to go ahead and layer it, making sure you have overhang. Okay, so layer, layer, layer. And we're going to do this all the way around. Now, if you grab 2 pieces of bacon like I just did, just make sure you separate them out. We'll go ahead and continue our layering. As you might suspect, because the layers are in the middle, you're going to start getting a buildup here. We're going to take care of that at the end. We're going to just kind of smush it all down. So we're not worrying about that very much at all. And making sure that it goes into the crevice here. You want to make sure everything is in nice and neat. And this, like I said, is a slow process. But it's going to be worth it at the end when you see how this all looks and tastes, quite frankly. So I'm just going to continue to do this, making sure you always have that overhang, okay? You see how that angle has changed now? That's fine. I want to make sure I have an even amount of overhang as I go. So we're just going to keep on doing this. And I'm going to speed this up so you're not watching me do it in its super slow motion. All right, you probably noticed that I did have a little bit of a gap there at the end. So you may have to adjust a little, but you want to make sure everything is covered. Now, our next step is that we go ahead and make sure that we put some pepper on our bacon. Again, you can do this to taste. This is about as much pepper as I'm going to put on this because I'm not a big fan of a lot of pepper. I may top it off with some though. And now you notice how this center part is kind of lifted. We're just going to literally smush it down. I'm making sure that everything is covered though. You see, by making sure I got it all into the corners originally, when I smush it down, it just redistributes just a bit. All right, our next step is going to be getting our potatoes prepped and ready to go in here. I don't cut the potatoes ahead of time so that they don't brown, and I don't want them soaking in water because then that will waterlog this. So I cut the potatoes as I go. So I'm going to cut a few of them. We're going to start our layering process, and I'm going to cut some more potatoes. But that's just how I do it. You can cut all your potatoes at once. I just wouldn't do it before you've done this part. All right, so we're just going to slice up our potatoes. You see I've done some already. I've put them in stacks using a cut glove, using my hand mandolin, making sure my fingers stay out of the way. So it's a pretty big potato. And we got all of our pieces, even our last one. Just going to stack that up right here. Aha. And then there's sometimes pieces you don't want. So if you haven't already cleaned up your potatoes, keep an eye out for those. I'm just going to move this way so I have free range of motion. I'm not worrying about hitting any of the other potato stacks. And by doing it after I've layered my bacon, I'm not worrying about whether or not things are going to brown. I'll have everything ready to go at this stage, once the potatoes are done, to just freely stack everything. I should say layer everything. So get this stack up. A few more. There we go. And that rogue one that jumped out, everybody goes back in the stack. All right, I'm going to keep doing this until I have all the potatoes done. All right, it's time to begin assembly. So remember, we put a bit of black pepper down. I'm going to take a whole stack of potatoes. The itty bitty ones I kind of put off to the side at the beginning because they tend to help me fill in. Starting on the outer edge, I'm going to cover them up about 1/3 of the way or so and shingle all the way around. And remember, we said about 2.5 pounds of potatoes approximately will give you 5 layers. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. Don't worry about it. Just make sure that everything you do is even. It'll all work out. So that's one stack. Grabbing a second stack. Making sure it goes all the way to the edge. And because they're from the same potato, now when I start the next one, I'm starting to go inside. Inside layer. And you'll quickly see how, by doing that, I can use some of these smaller pieces. I'm not going to use those just yet. I'm actually going to take some from this stack because we have a lot to go. And again, I'm still just coming right into the center. We want to make sure it's all covered. And these need to overlap just a little bit. So let's do that. So it's not a race. All right, we can put a couple pieces here to fill that in. All right, so next I'm using my spoon, and I'm just going to sprinkle some of the seasoning on. Again, as evenly as possible. And you'll notice I'm not putting any salt. And the reason we're not putting any salt is because the cheese has salt, the bacon definitely has salt, and you'll find that this might, if you add salt, it might kind of become inedible unless you're a salt fiend. Right, so we're adding some of our cheddar. I'd say about a cup of the cheddar. And just make sure that it's even. And then we begin again. So I'm going to take the current stack I'm using and starting, somewhere slightly different so that I get a good overlap and I'm not just repeating right on top of the others. Because when you cut this, if everything is lined up, that's why you shingle, it'll fall apart, and we don't want that. So we're going to keep adding each of these items as we go. See, just get that guy in there like that. And then, again, I'm staggering it. Next stack. I'm going to keep the ends for later. I'm just going to keep adding our potatoes. It's almost like dealing cards, but in slow motion. Very slow motion. Use these smaller pieces that we already have. There we go. All right, so we're going to keep doing this until everything is in our tart. I'm going to set this to fast motion now, so you're not watching me in slow motion. All right, this is going to be our last layer. Season. Make sure we get all of that. Put our remaining cheese. Any and all remaining cheese. Really don't want anything to go to waste. And I have a few little bits and pieces here. I'm not going to put them on there. So we're just going to get this out of our way. And now we're going to start bringing up, it doesn't matter where you start from, we're going to start bringing up our bacon, one piece at a time. Make sure we get that all. We're going to press this down again. It's quite full, and this will start to come together. You'll see. We're just going to push some of it down right now, and slowly bring up our bacon. This is the bottom, right? We already know. We already have the top set because we're going to flip this over. So this is our bottom. We're going to slowly bring up all of that bacon. We got it started. And now we're following where we naturally have the overlaps. Make sure you get all of it on there. You can stretch it just a little bit. Right, some pieces are overlapped a bit longer than others, some not, but we'll get it all covered up. This is where just taking a little bit of patience will pay off. Now you can get this all wrapped up the way I have it and set it aside in the fridge and cook it off the next day. Just make sure you bring it to room temperature before you put it into the oven, but it makes for a nice brunch item. breakfast item if you're serving a crowd. And you can see there is effort that goes into this, but it's really a showstopper when you turn it out, show it to everybody. So if you want to get it done ahead of time, you can certainly do that. All right, so I'm not as terribly concerned that we're not covering the middle because it's going to be the bottom. But I should have had a little more overhang here than I do. You can see I don't have that much overhang. It's quite full. There we go, almost done. The last couple of pieces. You can see they're a bit longer, so I'm using them to close everything up. Close everything up. All right, this is now ready to go in the oven. I'm not even going to take it off of this sheet pan. This is the exact sheet pan I'm going to use to put it into the oven. So it's going to go into a 350-degree oven for an hour and a half. All right, before we go into the oven, I've taken a piece of parchment paper, and this is actually the end of my roll. Otherwise, it would be a circular piece, a little bit bigger than this, but it doesn't have to be. This is enough. I don't want the bacon to shrink back too much from where I've placed it. So I've put the parchment paper on there, which will keep it from browning too much. And I'm also putting an oven-safe lid on top to kind of hold the bacon a bit in place for the first, 30 to 40 minutes or so. So my first check will be in about 30 to 40 minutes to see that I'm holding the bacon in place. Should the bacon, need it a bit more, I'll leave it on for longer. Or I can take it off at that point once I see the bacon is already crisping. And then we'll test it in about an hour and a half to see where we are as far as doneness goes. So remember, this will take almost 3 hours to cook, and then it has to rest for about 10 to 15 minutes. We're going to turn it out onto a platter, and you're going to be able to cut into it and serve it and, be the life of the party. So let's get it into the oven. All right, our oven is at temperature, so we're going to go ahead and put this in. This is really heavy, so make sure you use 2 hands, and if you have a rack like this, bring it out. It'll make life easier for you. 2 hands. Oh, that's heavy. Very heavy. Okay. All right. In we go for an hour and a half. Set a timer. Check on it. We're going to leave it to cook now. All right, it's been 30 minutes. We're going to do a quick check to see where we are. I'm always using an oven mitt because everything's hot. We're looking good. We have bacon cooking, but I'm going to leave it for another 30 minutes before I decide to take off the lid and the parchment because it's cooking really nicely right now. So I'm leaving it alone just because, and I closed it very quickly because I want to make sure that it stays at temperature. So that was a very quick look. It's nowhere near being ready because it's only been 30 minutes. We'll check back on it in 1 hour. All right, let's check on our tart. We've got some good bubbling going. I'm gonna take this lid off. It's very hot, so make sure you put it somewhere where no one will accidentally grab it. And you can see we've got some nice browning happening. I'm going to take this off. You see that? It looks beautiful. All right, so we're going to test this with a toothpick real quick. So grab a toothpick. And you want to test, it should go in easily or with a knife, and it's not even going in. There's nowhere near being ready. So we're going to close this up. And in about 30 minutes after the top has browned up, some of that bacon has continued to brown. Actually, I'm going to turn this around because I'm using the convection setting on my oven. And I want to make sure that this side gets as brown as that side. All right, so we're going to put this back in. I'm going to set a timer for 30 minutes. And at the 30-minute mark, I will probably come back and tent this with some foil. We'll test it again, and then we'll let it finish cooking for probably another hour after that. All right, so we've waited another 30 minutes. Let's see. Oh, we've got beautiful browning up here. Do you see that? So what we're going to do is just loosely tent this, very loosely, to make sure that the bacon doesn't burn. Careful not to touch the pan, it will burn you. It's very hot right now. We're going to finish cooking this off now. All right. All right, we're going to double check and see if everything is fully cooked through, because you can't just do this on time. So we'll take this off, which has done a great job of keeping everything from getting burned. We don't want that, you know, overcooking. And then you're going to test in a few different spots to make sure that it just goes in easily. Oh, the little fringe came off. And it feels like it's going in fairly easily. I'm not putting any pressure to speak of. I'll try a couple other spots. Yep, this is ready, and you can see it comes out nice and clean. So we're going to take this out very, very carefully. I'm going to need 2 hands for that, so I'm going to turn off the camera because I'm going to grab it from the sheet pan itself and use 2 hands to do so. All right, our tart is done. You can probably see it's still bubbling. It just came out of the oven. All of that fat needs to get drained off, and that's what these little lips are great for. They'll help me do that. The other thing you'll notice that in this version that I made, the bacon did peel back a lot, but it doesn't matter at this point. This is going to be the bottom. I'm not going to worry about it. I'll know better for the next time to leave more overhang than what I left in this case. So I'm going to carefully, using my mitts, I'm going to grab from both ends with the mitts, and I'm going to drain off some of that fat, and we're going to let this cool for about 10 minutes before we even try to invert it onto a plate. So we'll be back. All right, so we've allowed this to cool, and the first thing I'm going to do is just use a small offset spatula to make sure it's not stuck. Kind of loosen this up a bit. You see we have some things stuck here. This will definitely keep it from coming in without actually scratching our pan. So we want to loosen it up. Make sure you hold on. Hold your pan as best you can without burning yourself. And then it might be a trial and error thing to get it out of the pan a little bit, because some of that cheese may have leaked through. But we're going to try and make sure there are no sticking points. All right, so we're going to try. If it doesn't work, we're going to come back with a slightly bigger spatula and try and pry that up. So I'm going to take my cooling rack, feet up, put that on top here, and then making sure you have good full range of motion. You're going to want to lift and flip. And I can tell it's not out. So I'm going to carefully do it again. We're going to flip it back over to the right side. Okay, not everything always goes as planned. Move this off to the side, and that's why we have the large spatula with us. I'm going to use that to gently pry it up. Usually my little spatula will, my offset spatula will help, my little one, but this got a little more stuck at the bottom than I expected. Okay, I think we're good now. Oh yes, I can get the whole thing under there, we're good. All right, so again, with the feet of the cooling rack up so that when we flip it over, it can do its thing. And gently flip that over. It's still stuck. Well, there we go. I believe we've got the whole thing out. Nope, I missed some. Look at that. Well, you can see a real-time fail of mine. Oops. Sorry about that. So I'm going to just get that off. I should have moved it a bit more, but you can see right where it fits here. I'll get the rest of this on here. It's easier without the mitts. Ah, I see how it goes. Do you see how it goes? Don't you just love it when things don't work out? There's always a way to save yourself. You just have to look for the solution, look for the helpers, look for the solution, and boom, that goes right there. Get the rest of these out. Just flipping them over. And I apologize, it's not as beautiful as I had promised. But, you know, like I said, we can fix that. Nothing a little bit of parsley on top won't make a big difference for. And believe me, it will. All right, so there you go. Not as beautiful as I would have liked to show you, but you can see here how it cooked a bit more on the edges, and that's going to happen. So at this point, I can let it cool some more. I can get it onto a cutting board and start cutting. It really just depends. So let me grab a cutting board and show you what that'll look like. All right, so I got my cutting board, I've got my knife. I'm just going to move my knife off to the side. This pan isn't hot, so I have no problem with just scooching this off onto my cutting board. You can present this on a platter if you'd like. I actually like to present it on the cutting board itself because then it does double duty. So I don't have to worry about things. So we can just cut right in. Oh, hot, hot, hot. There we go. And you can see the layers. You can see how crispy I got it on the top. And this makes a really delicious accompaniment to a brunch, a breakfast. So if you want to impress your family, your guests, try making this tart. I would suggest doing it once for your family, you know, before you show off to others, just in case like you have a little bit of a fail like I did. I knew better. I should have scooched this under a bit more, but you can see it's none worse for the wear as far as presentation goes. And remember, you can just sprinkle some parsley on top as well to make it look even prettier. So I hope you try this because that is delicious.